everyone, my name is Kim and I'm a librarian at the Monroe County Public Library, and today I'm going to talk to you about how to make freezer paper stencils. So what's a freezer paper stencil? Well, you probably already know what a stencil is, right? Stencil is something like this. You've got a hard plastic, you've got a shape cut out, and you can use your pencil or your pen to trace around it to get a design to copy onto paper. Well, a freezer paper stencil is kind of the same idea, except instead of using a stencil like that, you'll be making a stencil out of freezer paper. And you might be wondering, okay, but why would I do that? Well, you do that because with a freezer paper stencil, you can transfer design onto fabric. So for example, I made this little bag and I put a freezer paper stencil on it of a clothespin, which is very fitting because this is the bag where I keep my clothespins. You can decorate lots of different types of fabric with freezer paper stencils. So for example, you could decorate a t-shirt, or you could decorate a tote bag, and you could decorate, right, your mask. So this is a mask that I decorated with a freezer paper stencil, and you can see it says read. Very librarian chic. So there's lots of different things that you can make with freezer paper stencils. How do you get started? Well, you are going to need a lot of different supplies. You'll need freezer paper, of course, and something to print on. Today I'm going to use this t-shirt. You're also going to need some kind of fabric paint, some sponge brushes, some kind of palette or a plastic lid that you can keep your paint on. You'll need scissors or an X-Acto knife. You'll get adult supervision if you're going to use an X-Acto knife. You'll need markers. You might need masking tape. You're going to need an iron, and you're going to need a piece of cardboard. All right, so a lot of different supplies, and we'll have a list for you in the comments below. The first thing you're going to need to do to get started once you have your stuff together is think about what image you want on your product. And the image that you choose, you're going to want to look for something called a silhouette. You can draw something by hand, or you can look online for a silhouette. And I pulled together a couple of examples, printed them off just to give you an idea. So here you can see there is this big unicorn. That would be a really nice silhouette you could use. This skater. I've got a little flower vase on the other side. So a lot of different types of silhouettes that you could choose. But when you're just planning out your design, you need to be very careful because you need to think about this idea that everything that's black is going to be where your paint goes. So you need to think about that. Everything that's black is going to be where your paint goes. And you need to think about the idea that you have to cut this out, right? So you want to look at little details and make sure there's nothing too small that would be too difficult. So for example, on this unicorn, you can probably see these little hairs coming off its tail. That would be really, really difficult to cut out, right? So just kind of think about those kind of elements. Another thing I wanted to point out was in this vase, you can see there's a center that is white right in the middle of the black. And if you have an element like that, you're going to need to do something a little bit differently later on, and I can show you that when we kind of get there. So you'll choose some kind of silhouette. Choosing an image from online is kind of cool because you can make it bigger before you print it out and kind of or get the size that you want. You can also freehand draw something. The image that I'm going to work with today is this one. It's one that I drew based on some images that I saw online. So online I saw this image of the sad panda and I thought that was really cute. I liked that and I did freehand draw it from that image. And then I found another image of bamboo because I wanted this panda to be next to some bamboo, and I incorporated that into the drawing. So I made this from a couple different sources. And that's the image I want to use today. So let's say I've got my image, I've blown it up to the size that I want, I've either printed it out and I've got the insides colored in black, or if I've drawn it by hand, I've colored it in with marker. That's going to help me as I get ready for this next step. All right, so I've got my image. The next step is to measure a piece of freezer paper to the size of your drawing. Now, I don't have to measure out one of these right now because I cut one in advance. So here we go. I cut out this piece of freezer paper that you can see is big enough to cover my panda bear. The next thing we're going to do is trace the image onto our freezer paper. One of the cool things about freezer paper is it's a little bit see-through. So I'm going to be able to really very easily trace this panda. But when I'm tracing, I'm going to be really careful because freezer paper has two sides, right? One side is not glossy, the other side is glossy. I want the glossy side to go down on my image. So I'm going to put glossy side down, and then I'm going to use my marker and trace this. And I like to use a permanent marker for this step. And then I would just trace the outline of my panda bear. I would trace the entire image. One thing that's cool about this step is if you make a mistake, you draw a line somewhere you shouldn't have, it's not really going to matter. You just got to remember when you're going to the cutting stage that you don't cut the wrong thing. As long as you don't cut the wrong thing, drawing an extra line here is not going to matter. All right, so I would continue to draw this entire shape out. You can see I've just done one little bit of it there. And then I could leave it as this outline for the next step, or I could color it in like this. Whichever you prefer is okay. Now, I'm not going to trace the entire panda on this program because I have one that I traced out in advance. All right, so I've got my panda ready to go. And all those marks where I scribble black, that's where I want my paint to go. So in this next step, what I'm going to do is cut the panda out. And I'm only going to be cutting away these black sections. So I've got a pair of scissors. I'm going to show you how this works with scissors. If I'm going to cut this out with my scissors, I'm going to take this drawing, kind of fold it a little bit, not crease it, right? It's okay if you do crease it, but you don't need to. And I'm going to make a little snip in one of those black areas. Because I want to cut away everything where there's going to be paint later. So again, I'm cutting away the black area. I'm cutting away where I want the paint, and I can cut. It doesn't matter if I make a diagonal cut like that through the drawing. It only matters, right, that I'm hitting those edges. Now here's that stage, right? If you made an accidental line when you were tracing it, you do want to remember not to cut out any extra mistakes you might have traced in. If you do cut out one of those mistakes, you probably want to start over because that might affect your end result, okay? So you would cut out this entire shape, and you would do it as you go, kind of turn it. Remember that you can turn the paper as well as your scissors to kind of help you get some of those more intricate cuts, okay? So you cut out the entire shape. Again, I have one of these prepared in advance here. So here is my panda. It's in two pieces because, right, his face sits alone in an island of black there. I've cut out my panda, and you can see these freezer paper stencils are a little bit delicate after you cut them out, okay? That's okay. You just want to be very careful not to rip them. Now that my stencil is cut out, it's ready to go on the fabric that I wanted to place it on. So I'm going to place it on that t-shirt. So I've got this t-shirt. I've got this t-shirt, and I'm going to lay it down on my surface. This is where you need your hot iron ready. Okay. And you're going to lay your stencil down exactly where you want it. Right? You're going to match up exactly where you want it on your shirt. And you're going to iron it. And this is really, really tricky, right? Because your stencil is really delicate. If you iron it just like you'd iron, like a piece of clothing or move back and forth, you're going to rip that stencil. So here you're going to be really careful. And again, you're going to want adult supervision. And again, you're going to want the glossy side to face down. Okay, so glossy side down. We're taking our iron, and I'm just going to dab it directly on, right? I've got my stencil where I want it. I'm going to press it down lightly. I'm going to do just one press at first, right? I'm going to make sure after I got that press in, that's exactly where I want it. And it looks really good. Okay, and I'm going to press again. And I'm going to kind of go up and down a little bit. I don't want to, again, I don't want to go back and forth like this. I'm going to press up and down. Try to make sure this stays in place. Be careful if any of those little corners or edges gets kind of folded under. You want to be careful to unfold them. Be careful to unfold them while also being careful that your fingers won't get burnt in this process. All right. Okay, and I have the first part of my stencil down on the paper. So you can see here, it's going to be actually really hard to see because it's white on white. But I've got the stencil on the paper. But I don't have the panda's face on, right? I have an extra stencil here to be the panda's face. What I'm going to need to do is iron this piece on separately. After I've got the big, the bigger part of my print down, I'm going to place this piece down, glossy side down. I'm going to place it on my shirt in the area that I want it, and then I'm going to press it down. So I'm going to kind of match it up, make sure I've got it exactly where I want it. And I usually eyeball this. You could just kind of eyeball it, comparing back and forth to my printout. And then same thing, once it's in place, I'm going to press it down. Okay, so my whole pattern is on the shirt. And the next step you want to do is check to make sure around all your little edges that they got properly pressed down. You want to make sure every single edge, everywhere you have a point on that paper is connected to the paper, is connected to the fabric. And this is pretty cool, right? That glossy side, right, when you've used the iron, kind of fuses very lightly with the material, right? So I've got that stencil on there, and that's going to help the paint, when we put the paint on, not bleed into the areas where we don't want paint. And speaking of painting, we are ready to move to that step. Now, I'm about to paint this shirt. I don't want paint on the back, so I'm going to put a piece of cardboard behind, inside this shirt. So I'm going to stretch this shirt out. And as I'm doing this, I'm seeing that some of my stencil is coming up, so I'm going to press it again in just a second here. So I've got my shirt onto the cardboard. I'm going to lightly press down again where some of my stencil came up. Yeah, this looks good. This is ready to go. So the next thing you're going to want to do is use your masking tape. This is an optional step. You can see that my t-shirt's a little loose on the cardboard. What I'm going to do is turn it upside down and pull the back lightly and use this masking tape to tape back the sleeves and these edges, just to kind of keep them out of the way and help make the project a little bit more taut. Okay. All right, so I've got that taped. I've got this ready to paint. And the next thing I'm going to do is shake my paint up a little bit. And I'm going to squirt out just a little bit onto my palette. So I'm going to squirt it onto the palette, just like so. And then I'm going to take my foam brush and I'm going to dab it into that paint. Because I don't want this to be super gloppy, but I want it to be all over the surface of that sponge brush, right? So I'm going to press it, press it, press it, press it, press it. And when I've got my tip pretty loaded there, I'm going to go onto my shirt and I'm going to press that paint in just on those open areas, right? Open areas of my stencil where I wanted that black or that other color to appear. And you can probably see, right, I'm not using black today, I'm using green. So I'm making my panda green because why not, right? It's my panda, I can make him green. All right, so you would do this until the entire shirt is covered. And I will tell you, you're probably going to use more fabric paint than you think you're going to need. So it's always a good idea to have a little bit extra if you're thinking about your project, right? So I'm going to show you, I've got just a little bit of mine done. It doesn't matter, right, that I've spread some paint out that's on top of the stencil now, that's okay, and that's actually what you want to do. And when I did those paint moves, I'm not sure if you saw this or not, but when I did those paint moves, I did bring my sponge up and down, just like this. You don't want to swipe your sponge brush like back and forth, because that will help the paint try to smooth underneath your stencil. You don't want it under the stencil, right? So you're just going to go up and down just like this until it covers your surface. And the amount of paint that you use matters too, right? If you use a little bit too much paint, it's going to dry really thick and it might not be as comfortable to wear. So I always like to try to dab my brush very thoroughly when it's on the palette, and then so it's spreading very thinly, even if it means I have to press several times to get full coverage. All right, so you would do this until the entire shirt was ready, was filled up, and then you would need to let it dry. And I think it is best to wait overnight, right? It's a long time to wait, but you really don't want to pull this out before it's ready, or else you've ruined your project, right? So I'm going to set this aside so we can wait for it to dry. And I will tell you a few more things before I do a big reveal here. So if you are making a project, let's say I was going to work on this bag, and you've started to iron down some pieces, and you think, oh no, I don't really like that design after all, or it's not really where I want it to be, that's okay. You can simply pull off the pieces of freezer paper that you don't want there. It's not going to harm your fabric at all. You might have to recut your freezer, your stencil, especially if you've removed these a couple different times, but it's not going to do any damage to your bag, right? And I've used a lot of cotton materials here and a lot of jersey materials. Those are really great, right? Whenever you're choosing your surface, you want to make sure it's something that can be ironed onto, and you want to make sure the paint that you're getting is appropriate for it. Materials like, leather and silk are not going to be really great for this project. Okay, so I've got this one that I'm in the process of creating, and I want to show you a couple other ideas. One of them is this one, right? So this is something else I've kind of been working on. I've got a design that says "Be kind," and you can see that I've colored my pattern in 3 different colors. And I wanted to show this. It's not painted yet, right? But I wanted to show it because you can use more than one color. I'm using only green for my panda, but on this project, I am going to use 3 colors. I've got 2 different color blues, and here where it's green, I think I'm actually going to paint that purple. So you can use different colors on your projects, even though I've only used 1 color on this panda. You just have to kind of think about it and plan ahead. And I do recommend, if you're going to do that, to color your sample, your pattern in 3 different colors as well. All right. So my big kind of reveal. I can't finish the panda one on screen today, but I do have another one that is finished. It is dry and it is ready. So I created this one, I painted it, and now it's ready for that stencil to come off. And I'm going to peel it off while we're in this program. This is a little bit scary because I don't know what it looks like under here. I'm just hoping that my design worked. All right, so here we go. I'm going to start from one edge of that freezer paper, and I'm going to start pulling it off. And it's going to be a little bit harder to pull where I have paint. I'm just going to pull it off. Oh no, this is looking pretty great. Okay, I'm pulling it there. And I've got most of it off now, but there's some little bits in here. Yeah. So it's a little bit harder to rip off around where I've got some paint already. But it is but it is something you can get, just kind of grab at the edges of it. It helps if you have a little bit of a fingernail. All right, perfect. And now my project is complete. This turned out really, really nicely, I think. Let's get this masking tape off. Perfect. And I've got the most awesome tote bag now to carry my current reads. All right, and that's how to make freezer paper stencils. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and if you end up making something cool, let us know. Post in the comments or share with us on social media, okay? Thanks so much. Have a great day.